Hello and welcome to today's episode of JonesingLife. I'm thrilled to have Lyndsay Archer joining me here today. Lyndsay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Lyndsay is the co-founder and creative executive of Studio Archer, which is a design studio. And Lyndsay, you and I first met probably about 15 years ago when we were both working at Disney, and we'd have opportunities to meet interns or business professionals, and you might meet someone in strategy or finance, and you were someone who, even looking at some of your drawings, I was like, this person is a very talented individual, and I look forward to following her career. And I've done that through LinkedIn, through Instagram, and the design that you've done and the progression of your career is incredible. But let's start off. You're a designer. How did you get started in designing?
That's a great question. So growing up, I did art from pretty much the age of, whenever I could hold a pencil. So I was always at my drawing table. My dad, though, was an architect. And so when I was really young, before I started school, I'd go to the office and visit him at lunchtime. Sometimes when he was working late, my sister and I would play hide and seek in the office. And so I just was introduced to architecture and design at a very early age. Found it quite fascinating. I loved looking at the models and just stacks of drawings. And so that piqued my interest early on. But I always thought I would go to be an artist or maybe study music. I did a lot of that growing up through high school. But when I got to college, I decided to jump feet first into architecture and interior design, and the rest is sort of history.
Where did you grow up and where did you go to college?
I grew up mostly in Boise, Idaho, and then I also went to school in Idaho at University of Idaho. So, not super far away, but far away enough.
And I mean, with that, right, when I think of design, creative, I typically think of huge metropolitan centers like New York City or LA. How did the Idaho experience influence the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say for me, I love to learn. So I'm pretty self-motivated in terms of, probably whatever college I would have gone to, I would have had a great time. I would have just made the most of it. What I loved about University of Idaho was its size. It was about 12,000 students when I was there. So I just had really close relationships with my teachers and professors were really, really great. But I also left Idaho like right after graduation, which I think is important. For me, at least, it was important to get out and see some different things, go to some bigger cities and sort of get that design inspiration. I just rub elbows with different people. You don't have to go to a big city necessarily, but I do think it's important to spend time, traveling and seeing different things because, if you're approaching design from a single perspective, it's difficult to, sort of grow the industry. So for me, growing up in Idaho was great. It gave me a lot of opportunities. I was also homeschooled, so I got to do a lot of art and design on the side, like extracurricular stuff, because I got my general studies out of the way early, and so that was helpful too, right? To be able to dabble in some of these other things. So I had a bit more time to decide like what I wanted to do. When I went to college, I felt more confident in my decision to go after interior design versus art or music. I still pursued those paths and got minors in art and architecture, but ultimately interior design was the good fit for me.
And I suspect landing a job at Disney, especially being in the creative side of the business, has to be a dream job. How did you end up working there?
Yeah, totally a dream job. I mean, when I was young, drawing and stuff, I thought it would be just the best job ever to work for Walt Disney Animation. And then I found out how many art frames they have to draw per second or like are involved in like a second of film. And I was like, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. That seems like a lot. So I remember sitting, I think it was at the computer lab at school, and I was applying for internships. I was pretty dead set on like going to Seattle and working at one of the big firms. I really loved and still do love adaptive reuse, historical preservation projects. And so that's kind of the trajectory path I would go down. But I applied for some Disney internships because I figured, why not? One other important thing to mention, I remember a trip to Disney's California Adventure. My dad was a huge Disney history buff growing up. He grew up in California and went to the parks, not super often, but often enough to become a fan.
Land your dream job at Disney. Or I suspect anyone who's designing anything is like, all right, there's a business component to Disney, and you and I will dive into that a little bit. But then there's also I worked on the finance side. And what I loved about working with Imagineers is you might have a project that comes up and the budget is, let's say, $20 million, which is not a huge project at Disney. And the Imagineers get a hold of it and they want every single detail. They're going to talk about experience. And all of a sudden, this project that was 20 million is about 50 million. And you're like, this is wonderful. But is anyone going to really notice that tiny little subtle detail that was in the 25th minute of film XYZ that was in the deep catalog? No, I think we can get away with it and pull it back. And you're not going to get to the 20 million, but you might get to there. So get into Disney, especially coming from Idaho. Like, I don't know if many people make that transition. I suspect a lot of people come from Cal Arts or other huge design schools. It's a testament to you. I think within the last couple of years, you've been recognized by Design, which is a retail magazine, as being one of the top 40 under 40 designers that's out there, which is pretty incredible. And it's also a testament to a great organization that says, we're going to go find the best talent that's out there, regardless of where they come from. Yeah. So how did you end up in Orlando?
So it was through the professional internship program. And like I said, I remember applying to these internships and I figured, I'll just apply anywhere that I feel like would be a good fit. So I applied for 3 different internships and I didn't hear back for 3 months. And so I just figured, okay, not good enough. I didn't even hear from them. So I'm just going to continue my path.
And at 2021, that's actually a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just remember it was still in college. It was the week of my capstone presentation. I was very sleep deprived and I got this call from a guy at Disney named Tom. And he was like, hey, your portfolio slipped through the cracks, but I'd really like to talk to you. I'm really interested in, your application for this internship. Long story short, I landed the internship. But what was interesting, and I always tell students this, you need show yourself, show who you are as a person in your portfolio, because especially now, because everything is so digitally done and we're working in the computers and, with the emergence of AI, a lot of the work starts to look the same. But if you put your personality into your portfolio, then that helps you stand out. And I had put I did a lot of watercolors. It was actually my first business. I had an art business selling my prints and paintings. But I put some of my personal artwork in the back of my portfolio. And that's actually what piqued Tom's interest in just wanting to chat with me, because he's like, I haven't seen this before. This is different. It's unique. You have an artistic sensibility to your work. And so that was what got my foot in the door, at least, from an interview standpoint. But the internship was in Orlando. So as an Idaho girl, I was like, well, yeah, sure. I'll go to
change of pace.
A little bit. It was great. I drove my 2-door Honda Civic Coupe cross country and all the way down to Florida. And it was great. It was super different, but it was really good for me, right? To get out of my comfort zone. I left all of my friends and family behind. I moved in with, 3 girls I didn't know, and which they ended up being great friends. I was in some of their weddings and just dove headfirst into it, right? Yes, it's scary and it's intimidating, but I was really excited, to be able to go work for Disney, dream come true. But just living in Orlando on a, East Coast, I really hadn't explored much of the East Coast. So it was just really good. I think it's good to sort of, interject yourself into new situations in life, because it grows you and it challenges you. So that was a great time I was in Orlando. I think cumulatively for 6 years. We can talk about Shanghai, but I was in China for a little bit of that.
So in Orlando, you said you were there for 6 years. Name some of the highlights of the different projects that you had worked on.
Yeah, worked on a lot of, Shanghai was kind of my first big capital project.
All right.
Hired in January of 2012 and immediately started on Shanghai, but I was part-time on that. So the other work I was doing was a lot of rehab. I was with the retail design group at the time. So I was managing the portfolio of projects at Epcot, in terms of SQS or, show quality services. Disney's full of acronyms. Working on rehabs, managing smaller rollouts or pop-up retail activations. But that was really good to be working at both of those things simultaneously, because Shanghai was obviously a huge capital project and there was a lot to be learned there. But then being able to work on some smaller projects, see them from concept to completion, work with all the different stakeholders in the park, that gave me a different perspective and was really helpful. Go over to Shanghai and finish out construction of Shanghai Disneyland. And even today, just working with all the different parties that are involved in a design project. I think that early training just gave me a really good foundation.
And even working in retail, it's interesting how the business model has changed significantly and continues to change in a fast period of time. When I was working in the merchandise line of business, I remember as you guys were looking at some designs, and I suspect this even changed, there used to be signage that would be up high. And that is starting to all come down low because with the introduction of iPhones, people don't look up anymore. You're bringing it down more to eye level. And I think at one point in time, did you work on the World of Disney?
I did. Yep.
And for listeners that are out there, at each Disney property, there's something called the World of Disney. And it's not a secret. It is the highest grossing square footage, maybe only behind Apple stores, but it generates a tremendous amount of revenue. But also, you maybe talk a little bit about guest experience, because I recently took my kids to World of Disney, and you and I connected later, and I go, oh my God, you worked on this experience, because everything used to be closed off, but maybe some of the things that you worked on there and things that you even think about as a designer now working in retail.
There has been a massive shift in retail, and we could probably have a whole podcast episode just about that. Disney, like any other company, has to change with the times. I worked on World of Disney in Shanghai, which was a little bit different. Coming back to the States and working on World of Disney's in Orlando and Anaheim, the previous version, yes, it was just really highly thematic, and it was beautiful. It was had lots of character sculpts, but each room was so themed that as the company grew and acquired all these different brands, it became hard to pigeonhole some of those brands into these really thematic areas. Take, for example, Star Wars as an IP and the merchandise that accompanies that. Trying to fit that into a very Fantasyland type styled room just was difficult. And then from a shopping standpoint, I mean, those, to your point, those locations are designed for Easter Sunday. They have a lot of foot traffic. They are the one-stop shop for everything Disney at the parks. It's, you can go there and get just about anything. Really opening it up and allowing people just to have a better flow and not to feel claustrophobic. And then really to give a lot of that theming over to the visual merchandising team, so that as new movies are launched or new IP is acquired, they can really activate a whole area with technology and just with set dressings to make it feel more cohesive and aligned with that brand. Don't get me wrong, there was still like a whole backstory for those World of Disney rehabs that informed the design and the materiality and some of the architectural choices that we made. And we still tried to honor, the original architecture that was craftsman. I would say a overscaled, toonish kind of craftsman, which was great. So we kept a lot of that baked into the DNA, and then just added a little bit of layering on top to bring it into an artist studio, animator studio language. So when I go, certainly it feels a lot more open. It feels easier to shop. There is
It
less.
flows a lot nicer. I remember just walking in a couple months ago, and it felt not as tight. And obviously, I think the ease of purchasing products, even on a crowded day, made it easier. You worked on projects in Orlando, which is a certain type of guest versus a lot of domestic visitors. You do have a lot of international, but I suspect Disney Shanghai just culturally is different. How would you, when you're designing experiences, even from California to China to other places, how do you think about culture and individuals in that experience?
Yeah. I mean, Shanghai was a great crash course in designing for a different culture. And I think Disney did a phenomenal job. It's interesting because, you move in as a Westerner, you're coming into China and like, okay, well, we're going to design Disneyland for Shanghai. That conjures a certain, image. And Disney did a great job of leaning in and really doing a lot of market research. I think a lot of it comes down to like, what is the data saying about what people are looking for in new experiences? And then how can we, push it even a bit further? But Shanghai Disney was really based on, bringing Disneyland and that concept to China and giving it a uniquely Chinese spin. I think that was fascinating. I mean, I'm biased, but that is my favorite park just because of the level
You
of
put a lot of hours into it, so
yeah.
it probably
Well,
is a little biased.
I was sort of an end of an era, I think, for that level of park, but so much detail and just a lot of intentionality. And we got to work with some amazing local craftsmen. Uh, Leaning into like the artistry that's available locally, I think is really important to be genuine in how you approach design for different cultures, and don't assume that what is important to them. Do the research, get to know the people. I mean, the people in Shanghai were lovely, especially the people we worked with at the parks, our local Shanghai team. They were phenomenal, super talented, so kind, and we just formed great partnerships. And through that partnership, you learn how to work not only together, but how to create a better product, because you're coming at it from, again, that like different perspective and blending best of both worlds.
I'm curious, how long did you say you lived there for?
I lived there for 2 years. I traveled back and forth. I was living about 6 months in Shanghai and 6 months in Orlando, which got really old really fast. And
I'm sure.
then they were like, hey, can you just move over here? I was like, yes, that would be great. I was over in Shanghai for 2 years.
What a great experience. And then, so you're in Shanghai for 2 years, and then you come back to, where did you move back to?
I moved back to Orlando for 18 months. And that was really when I was working on the World of Disney stores, and then relocated to Glendale, California.
And how long were you in Glendale for?
3 years.
When you were there, what big projects were you working on while you were in Glendale? In Glendale, for people who don't know their geography, it's Los Angeles.
Yes. I was working for Walt Disney Imagineering in Glendale, California, which is one of the headquarters. And I was working on Epcot. So it was really the reimagining of Epcot, particularly the front of the park. I was leading interior design for what is now called World Celebration. It used to be Future World. And that was a phenomenal project. It was very different from anything else I had ever done. I love Epcot just as a park, and sort of what it stands for, just the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, and how it's ever evolving and ever changing, nodding to the past, but really leaning into the future. And it was a design challenge for sure, because there's not a lot of IP that's baked into that front area of the park. I mean, Epcot was never meant to be a home for characters. It was a community, a world community. And the front of the park was really about technology and experimentation, and how can we move things forward, and what new ideas are out there, and can we explore those a bit. So, although Walt Disney's version never really got built, the spirit of it still very much lives in that place. Taking that language of aspiration and optimism, how do you make a design in a theme park that embodies that and still embraces the IP? Because let's be honest, that park needed more things for kids to do, and we want characters in those spaces. But how do you apply it in a way that feels very design forward, and really using abstract language to inform the designs? There are a lot of things in World Celebration, in the interior design specifically, that are speaking to connection and community, but in really abstract ways. Just the way.
And can you give a specific example of interior design there? So next time when someone's walking around Epcot and you walk through the front gate and you see Spaceship Earth, this is something that Lyndsay and her team had worked on.
One of my favorite details, there's a large restaurant and a large retail store that our team worked on mostly for those. Those are the big projects within that capital portfolio. There are some floor installations. We used a new type of terrazzo that's biodegradable. So using a very traditional material, but in a new sort of technology forward makeup. Nodding back to Epcot, there are some motifs on the floor that are the original master plans for Epcot, or Walt Disney's sort of, his Imagineers, his close Imagineers, their sketches, their early sketches of Walt Disney World, and so layout of that. We embedded these little pieces of history into the floor, but using a new technology. If you're familiar with, this is a bit deep dive, but if you're familiar with how terrazzo is made, or how they, get different colors, they basically have
I don't. What is terrazzo?
Terrazzo it's an aggregate. It's basically stone and other materials, glass, mirror sometimes, mixed into a binder and then laid into the floor. It's a flooring type that's hundreds of years old. It's been made from concrete, and a lot of the terrazzo we see on interiors now is epoxy based. This was a biodegradable, like bio-based product that we were using. But what was really cool was, instead of laying down, zinc or brass strips to separate the different colors, we went to a company in the Netherlands that's using recycled polymers to 3D print in color those patterns. So the artwork itself, those original master plans for Epcot and Walt Disney World, were printed with a 3D printer in the Netherlands with a biodegradable material. In that way, we're nodding to the past, but looking to the future, and how we're going to create a more sustainable environment, how we're going to be more climate friendly, earth friendly. Just little things like that. Like, how can we push the envelope a bit? There's other examples, but that's a specific one that people have called out, and I think it's a fun.
I will look for it when I'm there.
Yeah, it's a good one.
When do you finish that project up?
That project finished in 2021. Right.
And then, so you're at a job that if you read the book, The Last Lecture, I forget who the author is, but he talks about different things that he wants to do. And one of his dreams, he was someone who had a ton of cancer, and he gives this last lecture, and he talks about everything that he wanted to accomplish, almost like Tim McGraw's like "Live Like You Were Dying," and he was Imagineer, and it's a highly taught after role. It's a highly respected role within the company. You were talking about 2021, big changes are on the way. What did you decide to do?
I decided to leave my dream job, which sounded crazy. And a lot of my friends and family thought I was crazy, supportive, but they're like, why are you going to leave? I mean, I came from a family of my grandpa worked at the same company for his entire career. And I remember he passed right before I left, but I remember him asking me all the time, he's like, you're going to retire with the Walt Disney Company, right? And I was like, yes, grandpa, I am. I'm a lifer. And I think the pandemic gave us all a different perspective. Working from home, there was a lot of time just to ponder and, is this what I want to be doing? And don't get me wrong, I loved my experience at with the Walt Disney Company. I had the most amazing mentors and bosses. I rubbed elbows with Imagineering legends and learned so much from them. So I attribute a lot of my success in my career to the 10 years that I spent working at Disney. But I just, Epcot piqued my curiosity because we were working with a lot of architects and designers from New York, from Los Angeles, and just getting this amalgamation of like artists and really great design talent. And it just made me think like, well, what else is out there? Like maybe I want to design more than theme parks. Maybe I want to take those lessons of like immersive and emotion and move them into the urban space. It felt like a crazy decision. I remember right before I did it all virtually. We were working remote still when I gave my 2 weeks notice. And I just remember, am I making the right decision? But I knew in my gut that I needed to do it. And if I didn't do it, then I probably wouldn't ever do it. So the pandemic gave me a bit of that kick in the pants that I needed to jump ship.
You start your studio, your own studio.
Mhm.
Were you already living? Because now you're back in Idaho, correct?
Correct.
Are you living there when you decide that, hey, I'm going to go do this, or you're like, okay, not only am I going to do my own thing, but I'm now also going to move halfway across the country again?
Yeah, the move was not a planned move. My partner and I, who he was also with Disney, we decided to go on a road trip mid-pandemic. We were a little bit tired of being cooped up in LA. So we decided to put all of our stuff in storage and just do the national parks for a couple months. We decided to make a pit stop in Boise, Idaho to visit my family. And long story short, we found a really cute house that we liked and decided to buy it. And then it was like, well, do we need to go back to LA? We're kind of still on the road trip. But no, when I
Still on the road trip.
on the road trip. It's been great. But yeah, we talked about going back to LA. So when I gave my notice, I didn't really, there was a lot of unknowns.
And it's wild because we're in the midst of the pandemic, and there's nothing nicer than a steady paycheck. And Disney is a big company. If any company's going to weather it, but you start your own studio. There's one thing that I'm really excited to talk about. But did you have small projects before we get to that big project that you were working on?
Yeah, there were little things. Another silver lining of the pandemic, a lot of people left and went to do other things. There were a lot of taps on the shoulder to like, hey, do you want to come work on this thing? Really exciting. And so that helped give me confidence to leave, honestly, because I just knew it sounded like there were other things going on in the world. And so I felt, somewhat comfortable, I guess as comfortable as you can, starting your own studio. It's incredibly scary, but you just do it and, take it day by day. There were a couple other small projects that gave me the confidence to say, okay, we can definitely do this. Let's lean in and let's go 100%.
And I'm gonna steal the lead right now. For those y'all who are listening, Lyndsay and her team worked on the retail locations at the Intuit Dome. I still have a ton of friends in LA. Everyone who has gone to a Clippers game says it is the best experience across the board of any NBA team, from watching the game to the food and beverage to the merchandise location. And you guys scored this great opportunity. How does a small shop, small design studio win this?
We won it through connections. I mean, relationships. And I always, if I'm mentoring or talking to students, like you just never know where a conversation is going to lead, and you never know what bridge you may need to cross to get there. So you don't need to be best friends with everyone, but it is really important to show up every day at work and do your best and make friends, to have relationships with people where we all spend so much time at work. It's really important to enjoy what you do and enjoy the people that you spend time with. I had just left, and there was a gentleman by the name of Jim Fielding, who used to be CEO of Disney Stores, a merchandiser, a wonderful human being. He was on the project already. The Clippers had found him and asked him to lead merchandise really early, just some early thoughts. And it came time to like, okay, well, we need to design what these stores look like. And he reached out to his network and found me. And, so I just remember sitting on the phone with him, and he's like, we're interviewing other people, but I want to, well, let's just work together. Like, we had a little cohort, and we had a very small team working on that project up front, which I think is great. I think I'm a big fan of like small, mighty teams who can punch above their weight class. And even if you're working in different locations, I really think you can do amazing things virtually if you have the right people in the right roles. And I think we did. I think Jim did an amazing job assembling our team that was consulting on that project. And yeah, we got introduced, I guess, through the Disney grapevine.
You talk about, or I've seen this on your Instagram, maybe on LinkedIn, about experiential design. What does that mean to you, and how do you incorporate that into projects that you're working on?
It's a really interesting topic right now because everyone is talking about experiential design, immersive design. There are different interpretations of that depending on what market you're in, or even what demographic you're designing for. But to me personally, experiential design really has to do with the emotion that you're crafting in a space. Like, how do guests, patrons, fans, what do they feel when they come in? How do we make them feel through the environment and through product and through personal interactions? What is that feeling that you're trying to evoke with these spaces you're designing? So that's what experiential design means to me. It's multisensory, absolutely. It's designed for different modalities. But if you have to boil it down, I really think it's how it makes you, feel emotionally.
And maybe for someone who's listening who has never been to the Intuit Dome, can you take us through that experience of walking through one of the merch locations? Is it multiple merch locations? Is it one merch location? Is it omnipresent, meaning that is it tied into not just a location or their websites? I don't know. This is me just curious on how retail has changed in the last couple of years. And you're at the forefront of it.
Yeah, it's shifting. There's a lot of really cool things that we did at Intuit Dome, and I really attribute it to the vision that Steve Ballmer and Gillian Zucker had. Gillian Zucker's the president now of Halo Sports, but they just had a really clear vision, and they were not afraid to take a risk and to do something different. And I think that's really important because if you are we talked about looking at the data earlier, but if you're only looking at the data, it becomes really scary to do something that's literally never been done before because you just don't know if it's going to work or not. And there's always a chance that it won't. But they really leaned in, and I appreciated that as a designer. I love, our team loves working on things that haven't been done before. We're not afraid of that. And I think I definitely learned that, or had those principles instilled in me at Walt Disney Imagineering. But taking, this idea of a frictionless retail store was one component of it. And that really means, there is no point of sale, there's no cash counter, there's no cash machines for sure, but there's not even a place to pay with a credit card. It's all based on
How do I buy something then?
you have
Because I haven't been there yet. Everyone just says it's awesome. So I don't know. I'm curious.
You need to go. The whole Intuit Dome is based on frictionless and spatial technologies. You have a profile. It's very akin to like what you would go through now at TSA. There's a facial scanning component. There is, and I'm not the technology guru. We worked with folks at iFi, was leading the charge on that new tech. We partnered really closely with them, but the whole dome is meant to be frictionless. They want people in their seats experiencing the event they came for and making it super easy to run out and grab a drink or run out and grab a piece of merch. So you can be the loudest, most.
No shoplifting. You just walk in, you go in the merch store, you throw your jersey on, and it says, hey, Eric bought a jersey for this guy or a t-shirt. Okay, great.
Yeah. Which is, as a designer, an interior designer doing retail, sort of a dream come true to not have to dedicate 30% of my on-stage square footage to a cash wrap, because they always just end up being bulky and then there's equipment everywhere and it's really hard to keep tidy. So I love that. It's definitely a lift in guest experience, but also some friction because it's new, it's different. So like, how do I shop this store? And I have to download an app or I have to create a profile. Once you make it through those gates, figurative gates, then it's really easy. It becomes very quick to do those things I just said, run out and grab a sandwich, run out and grab a foam finger or whatever it may be. So that really, I think, opened up a lot of possibilities for what we could do in the store with that environment. A lot of the work that we did up front was really digging into like the Clippers. I mean, they're not the Lakers. They've always shared a home with the Lakers, and this was
Mm-hmm.
is the first home that they've had on their own for a long time. Leaning into that, this is a home for the fans. We're bringing the Clippers brand to life. As a female, like when you walk in this store, I want you to see you in the fan base. As a kid, maybe you're not a basketball player, who cares? Like come in and you can see yourself as part of Clipper Nation because of the assortment that we have, because of the visual displays, because of the environment just feels very inclusive and exciting and fan forward. It was really designed for the fans. A lot of the interiors was about being playful, introducing a little bit of color where it was needed, but really letting the merchandise, product is the hero, as I learned at Disney many years ago, really leaning into that. And then making it adaptable for the different players, because starting lineup changes all the time, players come in and out. And so really making the store feel fresh by showcasing the starting lineup in a new way. We had a couple moments of surprise and delight with technology, but not using technology for technology's sake, using it in a meaningful way to foster an interaction, to foster personalization. There's a whole creation station component where you can really go create literally whatever merch you want. You can even engrave a basketball. So there were just lots of things that we did that were firsts, but we felt they were important to do, not just to be different, but to really make it a fan forward experience. And then the Clippers have done an amazing job with the merchandise assortment, deciding to do their own in-house label, which is different. I think it's a really good step forward for sports retail, because for a long time, it's just been product on shelves. You get in, get out, and go to the game. But we're still doing that, but in a more playful and more brand way.
So with that, that's a flagship project. And I suspect even around the United States of America, there can't be that many projects like on that scale that people are working on, or you can even bid on a yearly basis. Within your whole portfolio, you've done a lot in theme parks. You've now done sports venues. What are some of the project areas that you're really excited about incorporating into Studio Archer?
I'm really excited about retail. Like I said, it's a landscape that's changing rapidly. And I love being able to work with brands to either come up with a new concept for them. Like, what is that? It's very easy to shop online, right? It's comfortable. I can do it from home in my pajamas, and it shows up at my door the next day. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to deal with any traffic. But it's important still to go and have interactions with these brands. And so brands need to move in a direction where they're giving guests, shoppers, a meaningful touch point, an interaction with the brand that builds awareness, that educates them on what this product is. People are also wanting to buy products that are more aligned with their social values too. What does this brand care about? What is their ethos? We talk a lot about breathing brand
And the experience. I can brew a cup of coffee in my kitchen for 25 cents, but how is it going to make me feel? In the morning when I watch the Today Show, makes me feel pretty good. But if I'm trying to get more emotions or get more dopamines that hit me, I want to be able to walk into a place and feel great about it. Same thing with, food or shopping. And then having spent as a small business owner, you're a small business owner. I'm always like, how can we support local a little bit? You touched upon this at one point, putting your unique thumbprint on your resume. And it's those locations that if they're unique, I'm willing to pay a little bit of a premium to it, because when I think about a lot of entertainment, it's discretionary dollars and discretionary time. And if I'm feeling better about it and I enjoy the experience, the process behind it, I'm more likely to attend that physical space, to purchase more. A couple questions for you as we tie up the conversation. If I'm young and I am interested, I'm doodling around, and maybe I'm in the top 25%. You're someone who's not even a top percent person. I think you're a fraction of a tenth of a percent, like extremely talented. As I said, I enjoy following you because I'm like, oh, that little doodle that you're doing. I'm like, man, that's amazing. You should be selling that, dude. I'll put it up in my kid's room. What's some advice that you'd give someone who's early on in their?
I would say that this profession, it takes a lot from you, but it can give a lot too. And like anything, you get out what you put in. But I would really lean into, what gets you out of bed in the morning, what excites you about design. It may be theme parks. It could be urban. It could be civil work. There's a lot of important design work that happens just in, pushing humanity forward. Or if you want to design, if we get to Mars, like what does that look like? But really honing in on your craft and realizing that it does take steps to get there. And, one of us gets there alone. You're always, a lot of times you're just being pulled up or pulled along by the people that are around you. And so it goes back to those relationships and like fostering meaningful relationships and showing up when you feel uncomfortable, or, go to the networking event, get involved in your local community, get involved in school organizations that you're passionate about, do things that really fuel you, and then really hone that into like your specific craft. Personally, I would love to see more bringing back that artistic nature of design. Not saying that it's been totally lost, but just the ability to sketch, the ability, like you were saying, I do a lot of, doodles, quick iterations, quick illustrations, even with clients, because it's a very fast way for me to get my idea out on paper and then they can react to it. There's always iteration. There's always going into the 3D environment and walking around eventually. But the ability to put pen to paper, your brain just operates differently when you're working in that capacity. But then to be able to sit with a client or even on a school project with your peers, if it's a group project, and sketch your ideas. Like, yes, it's scary. The blank piece of paper is always intimidating, but you just go for it. And that is something I would love to see just grow back into the industry, because it is really sort of a dying art, especially with AI. I mean, AI is a whole other conversation. We're using it in ways that make sense for our studio because I'm kind of an adapt or die, type. It's
You
like,
have to be. It's important. You got to stay with the times with technology. 3 other things I want to bring up that I thought were really important. Number one, you talked about when you were applying to Disney at the beginning, of having your personal watercoloring. And that was your personality. Whenever I'm interviewing someone and I see their resume, I make sure like the standards check off, but I always go to the bottom of the resume. I don't want to know, is this a unique person who I could sit with at an airport for 8 hours if flights are delayed? Number two, kudos to you to take the leap of faith and bet on yourself. The longer you stay someplace, it's more comfortable, and you went ahead and did it. And then the third component that you mentioned earlier was connections. Is great opportunities present themselves, and you're someone who is very senior goes, I know this young lady does great work, and she's going to do everything she can to create, as we talked about, that experience, the experiential design. And people weren't taking a flyer on you. They knew it was a safe bet that you were going to deliver. And I mean, that's just incredible. Those are 3 additional things that I would add across the board. I'm excited to share this story with a number of friends that I know that are in construction and do big developments. Anyone who's watching, just follow her on Instagram. Like, it's just amazing the cool stuff that she produces. Lyndsey, I want to thank you for being a part of the JonesingLife podcast today, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.